I would really like to thank the Alameda County Consumer Affairs Commission for inviting me to speak. My name is Kevin Modis. I'm the Outreach Director for the California Brain Tumor Association. And I'm talking to you today focused on the opposition to two assembly bills, AB537, that was sponsored and introduced by Assemblymember Bill Quirk, who's actually, his district lies within Alameda County, primarily Hayward, and also another bill, SB 556, introduced by Bill Dodd, Senator Bill Dodd. I wanted to talk about these bills because it ties into my earlier presentation to this group, associated with the basically unmitigated risks associated with wireless technology due to the FCC and the FDA's failure to engage in risk management, the type of risk management they would normally engage in with other agents. And these bills, while I normally focus on working on the federal level with decision makers in educating them about biological and health effects from wireless technology, I was asked to get involved back in California because these two bills paired together represent such a gross violation of local and county government rights and citizen rights. And so I have, kind of lent my expertise in a couple ways, and one of those ways is to come back and speak with your group. These bills, very simply, make it easier to place cell tower transmitters in the public right of way and close to our citizens. And they have, especially Assemblymember Bill Quirk's bill, AB 537, includes wording that allows for these transmitters, after a very short period of time, if local government hasn't processed the application, and again, local governments are under tremendous strain due to COVID and due to normal requirements that they have as local government bodies. And if they don't process these applications relatively quickly, 30 to 60 days, these transmitters will be deemed approved. And there's deemed approved wording in this bill. And in addition to that, there is wording that not only will it be deemed approved, but that permits shall be deemed issued. And it goes even a step further, that the applicants may begin construction. And there's specific wording for all three of these. This represents a workaround of local government oversight that has been shown to be so important in the past in terms of placing cell transmitters in a place that provides the minimum amount of problems and the most amount of benefits. And local government has shown a keen ability to do that. And it's taking away that right of local government. And it's taking away a very important level of protection for local citizens. So that's why AB 537 poses such a problem. And I was looking forward to presenting to your group because Assemblymember Quirk is an assembly member in your county. And I was hoping that you could exercise some influence over him to get him to withdraw this bill, because it simply is, we believe, a bill that is irresponsible and dangerous, frankly. And why do I say that? Well, the problem is the World Health Organization in 2011, their International Agency for Research on Cancer, looked at the issue of wireless emissions and found that wireless emissions are not safe. And they classified them in one of the categories of carcinogenicity as a possible carcinogen. And with the findings of a very large US NIEHS, which is the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences study, it was a $28 million study. It took 17 years to complete. It was the largest study of its type, and it was many studies within a study, was completed, and the findings were released last year for animals that were exposed to two the type of frequencies that are used in 2 and 3G type of wireless. And understand this, we still use 3G frequencies because they back up our 4G. It found clear evidence of carcinogenicity, clear evidence of cancer, the highest classification they could have given. And they based this on findings of clear evidence of a rare type of heart tumor, some evidence of brain cancer, some evidence of adrenal cancer. And what the experts reviewing the findings found was that this is generally a carcinogenic agent. And what they saw across the groups was DNA damage that's not supposed to be able to happen. And our safety guidelines are based on the fact that non-thermal wireless radiation cannot damage DNA. And this study proved that that was not true. So it was a very important study, and it wasn't the first study like this. This was just a big US study that confirmed thousands of studies that have occurred over the last 20 years showing that wireless radiation or radio frequency radiation is bioactive and therefore should be managed very carefully, exposure should be minimized, and safe alternatives should be used when possible. So together with the 2011 finding of the World Health Organization's IARC and the study that came out from the US last year, there has been a push by many scientists to have the World Health Organization reassess the issue and push for a new classification of probable carcinogen, that's class 2A, or class 1 human carcinogen, like cigarette smoke and asbestos. And understanding this, these two bills, AB537 from Assemblymember Quirk and SB556 from Senator Dodd, represent a real problem, because what they seek to do, and they're very open about it, is to facilitate the quick proliferation of wireless transmitters, basically anywhere the wireless companies want to put them. And by having a deemed approved wording in the bill, it means that after a certain time, the wireless companies will notify the local government, you have surpassed your set amount of time that you're allowed, and now this transmitter is deemed approved. So now the wireless industry will be telling the local government what to do and where they're going to be putting these transmitters. We feel that's the wrong place to put the control, especially in California. We have clear evidence that the wireless industry has no interest in protecting citizens from harmful exposures to wireless radiation. And I say that because the city of Berkeley, which is in Alameda County, passed the Berkeley Ordinance. And the Berkeley Ordinance, in very short wording, basically said, don't hold your cell phone next to your body or next to your head when it's transmitting. If you're carrying it, carry it away from the body. It was a very simple type of warning. CTIA, which is the wireless lobby group and represents the wireless industry, appealed this ordinance 3 times, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, was not successful in overturning it, so then challenged it again on new grounds and finally had it overturned. This was merely an ordinance that was saying, don't hold your phone next to your body, because if you do, it'll surpass the FCC safety guidelines for heating. So one of the reasons the study last year from the NIH was so important is all the exposures that were looked at in this study were non-thermal exposures. And it was a lot of care taken to keep the exposures non-thermal. And why is that so important? Because currently Our FCC has safety guidelines, and these are not safety standards, which is an important differentiation, because if you have a safety standard, it's usually developed by a government agency going through a very rigorous process of safety testing, biologically based safety testing. Instead, we have safety guidelines, which are basically merely a suggestion, and they were established based on the input of 3 non-government groups that have very strong ties to the industry. And as a result, we have a safety guideline that only protects against thermal exposures. So in very simple terms, you're only protected against your phone actually heating your body up a degree or 2. And that any type of biological effect or health effect from non-thermal exposures, you're not protected against. So this study from the NIH was very important because it looked at these non-thermal exposures, and it found very serious health effects for the animals, and DNA damage, which is not supposed to be possible. And that's why we don't need a non-thermal safety standard, because, well, it can't damage DNA. That was the theory. That theory has been proven false. So we're in a situation where now the wireless industry will be deciding where to put these transmitters with this kind of evidence that they have no regard, and they've actually spent tremendous amounts of time and money to oppose any type of protection from wireless transmissions. And that's why, especially for Alameda County, we think the Consumer Commission here, and as individuals, and actually any other way this can be opposed, it should be opposed, because we know already people in Alameda County, people in surrounding counties, and people across California and across the nation are reporting health effects from wireless emissions, whether they're from cell phones or Wi-Fi sources, cell tower sources like we're talking about today, or other sources. For people who are sensitive to radio frequency radiation, it takes very little exposure to develop symptoms. And there has been no safety testing by the FCC or by the FDA to find out who these sensitive groups are. We have no testing to look at certain ethnicities. Are certain ethnicities more sensitive to wireless exposures? Are certain genders more sensitive to wireless exposures? Are people with previous medical conditions more sensitive? We don't have information on that. Are children more sensitive, like they are with most environmental hazards? We don't have any safety testing on that as well. So we really are moving ahead with this type of aggressive proliferation of wireless with clear indications that there's a problem in terms of public health. And we lack safety testing from the FCC or the FDA. From the FCC, we have emissions testing, which is very different. It looks at how much a cell phone emits, and it doesn't look at what are the biological effects of those emissions. So it's very different. And then the other thing is we don't have a safety standard. Now, a safety standard would say, like we have for a lot of other things, people are only allowed to be exposed to this much wireless radio frequency radiation per time or per space. We don't have that. We just have this very general safety guideline that says, well, we only need to protect of thermal exposures and above. So we are in a very precarious position, because the FCC and the FDA, we believe, haven't done their job as they've done with other agents, as they've done with other medical devices, as they've done with medications and medical treatments. They haven't gone through the same type of safety rigor. So we think for that reason, this bill that is going to aggressively proliferate transmitters is a very dangerous idea and should be strongly opposed in every way. And we also say this because we know there are other alternatives. For internet provision, the provision of internet a far superior way to provide internet services to our residents is through fiber or wired connections all the way to the premise, all the way to the home, all the way to the business, all the way to the school. What's important about fiber and why it's superior is because we can achieve speeds, internet speeds, up to 10,000 times faster than wireless. Because a wireless transmitter has to transmit, it then has to go to another transmitter that receives and has to be interpreted and has to go through the air. So it's quite slow, actually, compared to fiber and wired connections. And unfortunately, due to the influence of the wireless industry, government and private citizens have been sold an inferior product in terms of internet connectivity. Fiber and wired connections are far superior in terms of speed. But they're not just superior in terms of speed, they're also superior in terms of cybersecurity. So this is a big issue, especially on the federal level. We have cyber attacks happening to businesses that spend millions of dollars protecting against cyber attacks, against businesses and government bodies that are supposed to be very well protected against cyber attacks. They're still being successfully attacked. We know it's also far superior in terms of privacy. For someone to violate the privacy of a fiber connection, they have to literally tap in physically to the line. Where if you have a wireless transmission, you can literally have a device that receives wireless transmissions to intercept that. And that's why there's so much push and concern about public Wi-Fi, because it simply isn't secure and you can't secure it due to the nature of it. And then fiber and wire to the premise is far superior also because of energy efficiency. One of the problems with wireless that people have kind of ignored with all the excitement about the convenience of wireless is the energy inefficiency. And that's due to the nature of wireless. And that is because when a wireless transmitter transmits, it transmits all over the place, in all directions, looking for a connection. And then very, very little of it is actually used for a connection, very minuscule amount. The rest of it is wasted. Where with fiber, all the energy you use, you actually use for a connection. So it's much more energy efficient. And in California, we have spent tremendous resources and time trying to reduce our carbon footprint. And frankly, wireless is an energy hog and is a real threat in terms of carbon footprint. So we have a far superior solution, as well as having the alternative, wireless alternative, having clear evidence of problems with health and safety, cybersecurity, privacy, energy efficiency, and speed, frankly. And what's important to understand is that these small cells, and the reason we're perplexed on a federal level why California is looking at these two bills and pushing these two bills, because on a federal level, they realize the problems with wireless and the small cells, and understand this. When these small cells were considered, it was 4 or 5 years ago when they were looking at 5G millimeter wave connections. This is 5G high frequency connections, 24 gigahertz to 90 gigahertz. And frankly, we're surprised this is coming from Sacramento, because one of the places they tested 5G millimeter waves was in Sacramento. And Verizon did the tests. And they showed that these millimeter waves did not perform well. They did not travel well. They did not carry data well. They were not dependable. And if you try to find 5G coverage with Verizon, you have a heck of a time, because they don't offer it hardly anywhere. They don't charge anything for it, because it basically doesn't exist. I mean, it exists, but on a very small scale. So 5G millimeter waves was supposed to provide the high speeds, quick data throughput, and all the benefits that we see with fiber were supposed to be able to be rivaled with 5G millimeter waves. But they were tested and they failed. So now companies like T-Mobile have moved to lower frequencies, and their 5G rollout actually uses 600 megahertz. Our current phones, and have for the last 20 years used 900 megahertz. So this is in the same span as our old frequencies. This is less than 1 gigahertz, where with 5G millimeter waves, we were talking about 24 to 90 gigahertz. So they went back to the old technology because the new technology didn't work. And why is that important? Because when we were considering small cell proliferation 4 or 5 years ago, it was because we needed small cells for these 5G millimeter waves that didn't travel very well. That didn't work. We're now back down to the lower frequencies, from 1 gigahertz, less than 1 gigahertz to 6 gigahertz. They travel very well. You do not need the same number of transmitters as you would with 5G millimeter waves. You do not need them close to people like they were proposing originally with 5G millimeter waves. So we don't need all these transmitters. By returning to the old frequencies, they can use the old infrastructure. They do not need to proliferate small cells. So this is another reason we are absolutely perplexed why all of a sudden California is pushing for these small cell to be proliferated. The only thing we can think of is Verizon spent a lot of money, this is my understanding, is that Verizon spent a lot of money on spectrum, on these high frequencies and auction. And now that they've spent all that money, they really want to try to make it work, even though it's been proven not to work. And on a federal level, they're moving toward fiber to the premise. And actually, we have a link to comments to the House Commerce Committee by former FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, where he basically pushes for fiber to the premise as the backbone for real economic growth and to address a lot of the weaknesses that have been seen with wireless. So this is Tom Wheeler, who was the one at the FCC who introduced and pushed and pioneered 5G when he was FCC chairman. Now he's singing a different tune, and we have a link to show that. So on the federal level, they're moving to the superior solution, which is fiber to the premise. Why California is still hanging on to these small cells, we can only theorize, but we know it doesn't make sense that California is going to have an inferior internet solution while the rest of the country is going to be moving to a superior fiber to the premise solution. And that doesn't make sense because California has always been the bastion of high technology and the leaders in that area. So this is really a move backwards and clearly in the wrong direction for a number of reasons. So this is another reason this doesn't make sense. And we wanted to bring this to the attention of the Consumer Affairs Commission because we've seen this issue with other agents in the past, and that is the issue of denying biological and health effects. And I was reminded just the other day that we saw this before with tobacco, when there were studies after studies showing that it was harmful and the industry pushing very hard to deny the science and keep any type of reform from happening until eventually there were hundreds of lawsuits of people being injured. And eventually the attorney generals of the United States took on the tobacco industry. We see the same thing happening with wireless. We have tens of thousands of studies showing it's bioactive. We have people being harmed right now and severely harmed through something we call, well, it has been called for 20 years, microwave sickness. It's also been labeled electrohypersensitivity or electromagnetic sensitivity. There's different labels for the same thing, people becoming sick from wireless radio frequency radiation exposures. And we have the lawsuits, we have the science, and we have the wireless industry borrowing the playbook from the tobacco industry in terms of generating denial about the problem, attacking and marginalizing the people who are sick, which I believe makes this such a sinister thing to do, and doing everything they can to prevent the public from being protected. We don't believe the attorney generals will take on this issue like they did with tobacco, because the wireless industry is very much present with the attorney generals and are busy funding their campaigns and spreading their influence on that level. I imagine they're not going to allow what happened to tobacco to happen to them. So why do I say that? Well, without the FCC, and understand this about the FCC's past chairman was a Verizon attorney. The chairman before him was Tom Wheeler, the former president of CTIA, the wireless lobby group. Yes, we had the president of the wireless lobby group running the FCC, who oversees the human exposures for wireless. So we have lots of evidence, including a Harvard report, that the FCC is a industry captured agency. They oversee and are responsible for the exposure. So we have a problem at the top. We have concerns regarding the FDA, who are supposed to advise the FCC in terms of biological and health effects. And currently, the Inspector General at the Health and Human Services, along with the FDA Internal Affairs, is now investigating whether the advice and information the FDA has given the FCC on the safety of wireless devices, whether it's been affected by conflicts of interest. That investigation is going on currently. So we have a real problem at the top. And on the local area, we have the passage of the 1996 Telecom Act that included Section 704 that has been used by the industry through legal challenges to limit the ability of local, county, and state governments from looking at biological and health effects. And so that's why we're in this conundrum. It's been limited to the federal level, and the federal level seems to have issues of industry capture, and industry conflict. But where we can have an effect is to oppose state bills like AB537 and SB556 that facilitate the placement of these transmitters and enforce what we know is problematic policies on the federal level. We can oppose these bills and not pass them.
I'm sorry, Mr. Modis, I'm not going to cut you off, but I want you to hold that thought, because we do have about 12 minutes left in today's meeting. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to wrap this up, and then I want to give the commissioners about 5 minutes for any Q&A they may have for you, and then we're going to get ready to wrap up. So if you would, sir, go ahead.
How much time did you say, sir? Let's go.
You got 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
2 to 3 minutes, okay.
Yeah, and then we'll give a 5-minute Q&A for you.
Okay, so what should be disturbing about the bill, especially AB57 by Assemblymember Quirk, is it includes a cutout for firefighters and fire stations. And it reads, due to the unique duties and infrastructure requirements for the swift and effective deployment of firefighters, this section does not apply to a co-location or siting application for a wireless telecommunications facility where the project is proposed for placement on fire department facilities. Now, we know the firefighters sought this cutout for health reasons. Why? Because they passed a resolution on a national level opposing placement of cell transmitters on fire stations because firefighters were shown to be sick. In California, they funded a study showing that they scanned firefighters' brains, that their brains were being affected, causing symptoms that were affecting their ability to do their job. So, I sat alongside the firefighters as they opposed these bills putting transmitters on fire stations for health reasons. So we know this is due to health. But the question is, why should they protect firefighters, who are some of our healthiest, most robust individuals in our population, and not protect pregnant women, and not protect nurses, and not protect teachers, okay, and not protect social workers, and not protect accountants and business people. Why not protect them as well? So the fact that this has a cutout for a special group that happens to have provided endorsements for the assembly member and documented funding for the assembly member over a long period of time, we question whether Assembly Member Quirk has the best interest of the public and the rest of California in mind, or is serving special interests in the case of firefighters and in the case of the wireless industry, because we have several articles with Assemblymember Quirk holding up checks of $25,000 from AT&T, for $500,000 for AT&T, for organizations in his district that we believe make it easier for him to be reelected. And we wonder whether he's catering to their influence in his district rather than looking out for the behalf of the people in Alameda County and the people across California. So there are some very serious questions there. And we know from the investigation on the federal level that conflicts of interest are a real issue when it comes to this issue of wireless exposures and wireless microwave sickness.
All right. I'm sorry, we're going to have you wrap up, sir. A lot of information because time is well spent. I'm going to open up this time for any members of the commission to offer any comments, questions to you. So I'm sorry. Does anyone like to have any comments for Mr. Matas?
I do, Joseph.
Identify yourself, please.
Joaquin Murphy. How many deaths are we talking about per year caused by this problem now, or is it only the G5 towers that you're opposed to? You're not opposed to the G4 towers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So 5G, because it didn't work, is using 4G frequencies. So 5G is just a marketing term, and that's one of the other ways the industry misleads government by asking for extra funding for 5G when it's using old frequencies. It's just the same old technology with a new marketing label. So you can't pay attention to that. And what we do know from the science is that radio frequency radiation frequencies across the spectrum are bioactive and can cause biological and health effects. It's just depends on the type of frequency and who's being interacted with in terms of what type of problem you have. So this division between 2, 3, 4G, 5G is really an artificial one the industry likes to put out there, saying, well, those studies are for 2G and 3G, so they don't apply to 5G. That's simply not true. The issue is polarization, the wave's polarization and modulation. Basically, the shape of the wave and how much data is put on it. And as that data passes through your cells, in very simple terms, the information on the follower wave kind of creates disturbance in the cell, and that disturbance over time can create a biological cascade, including oxidative stress. So,
I mean, cell phones have been in use now for almost 40 years. What is the estimated death rate from, or death count from?
With the short version. With the short version.
Yeah, right.
He still answered that question from the beginning. We kind of went off bar. So if you can kind of stick to the short version. Thank you.
Okay. We don't have a good count because people won't even acknowledge the problem. And the other thing is the industry likes to point to steady numbers in terms of brain tumors, but that's for the whole head. If they look at the 3 areas of the brain that get the most cell phone radiation, we see a significant increase. And there's a study that was actually done through USC that showed a very significant increase, especially in the area near the ear. So they don't like to look at those specific areas. If they did, they would see a significant increase. So that's the answer to your question. But our brain tumor registry doesn't do it by areas of the brain.
We got a comment from whoever's on 442. Go ahead. One of the commissioners, I don't know who that is. 442-7219, what commissioner is that?
Commissioner.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to ask Kevin, I looked at your March 15th letter that you wrote to the office of the Inspector General, and what concerned me was the wrongdoing. Could you speak on that?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I sent a copy to your commission of this request for investigation. In Appendix 6, what might be of interest to you is links to thousands of studies showing biological and health effects, much of that science being ignored by the FCC. And I didn't mention this, but the FCC doesn't have a health department, doesn't have anyone with a biological background who can even assess biological effects. So the fact that they're adamantly saying it's safe is really ridiculous. They open up comments and people send thousands of studies and comments. They don't even have the capacity to evaluate them properly. So it's really an absurd fraud on the public for the FCC to say this is safe because they don't have the capacity to say that, but they do. So in terms of the, I encourage people to look at the request for investigation because it points out some of the conflicts. Now, this is up for the Inspector General to evaluate, but from a layman's point of view, FDA Director of Devices and Radiological Health, Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, has come out very strongly in saying there are no adverse health effects and that we don't need to change our safety guidelines. But from a layman's point of view, we look at his relationship with his wife, and his wife is a partner at the law firm Arnold and Porter that was actually founded by a previous FCC chairman. And they are basically, they have handled more than $200 billion worth of transactions for AT&T. And they boast to be one of the primary law firms for AT&T. So she's a partner there. And obviously, it would seem that she's benefiting from that relationship and their family is benefiting from that relationship. And meanwhile, her husband is saying there's no safety problem with this technology. And if he did, it would obviously affect the business of AT&T. So from a layman's point of view, that's what really spurred us on to look more closely. And if you look at the investigation, it has a lot of other information pertaining to conflicts. And it's important to understand that on the federal level, they have very strict rules that we found that you can't even have the appearance of a conflict. I think we've certainly met that standard. And then you have to recuse yourself. He certainly hasn't recused himself. He's led the way in terms of saying that this is safe, even though we weren't able to find a study that is funded, a program that is funded in the FDA that looks carefully at this. And they certainly don't do biologically based safety testing to say this.
All right, we got about 6 minutes. I've been holding 2 questions. They're both yes or no questions, and I'm going to give a final comment. Yes, sir. Because time is well spent. My first question is: you mentioned carcinogens, and I'm assuming a carcinogen is something that can lead to cancer. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, carcinogen.
Right.
The reason I said cancer because people aren't used to hearing that. Yeah, cancer.
Got it. And then, secondly, you said that there was a proposed. I want you to know, was there a map of proposed sites within Alameda County where these transmitters would be? Do you know what districts or any cities have that been proposed?
Yeah, that's a great question. But it's worse than that. This bill would allow wireless companies to put them wherever they think they need them.
Okay, so the answer is no. And then last but not least, you talked about in this study, and I'll go to the study, when you talked about the DNA, was that existing DNA or reproduced DNA from the animals in terms of effects?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm assuming, they cut open the rats, examined them and stuff. I assume that's what it's from, but they go into great detail. This was a huge study. I'll send you the link, but I do not know that. Yeah.
All right. And then last but not least, where's this bill on the floor, these bills on the floor? Have it passed? Are they going through? Because I wanted to say that because the Consumer Affairs Commission is prohibited from any legislative, if you will, leaning one way or another. However, you are speaking to individuals within the commission that can take their own position. But as a body or a group, we as the commission will not or cannot go before the board and say, we oppose this. Now, we can stand with you as you go with the Board of Supervisors and make your presentation. And I'm pretty sure Marlene probably shared that, but this is huge, and it's a lot of information. And certainly it wasn't on my radar, but we're glad for you to have us here today. Because it is 5 o'clock, I'm going to ask if the commission would like to have you back for a part 2 next month, if you have more materials to share or more information, or if the time will allow us to do that. I don't know where these bills are, and I know you said you wanted to go before the board.
Yeah, let me answer your question. So the bills have come out of committee and passed both for each the Senate and the Assembly, and then they're going through appropriations now, and then they're going to have to switch and go to the other houses to go through committee and then appropriations, and then so they're like halfway through the process. And I would definitely encourage your commissioners to reach out. But one of the things I understand is that your body is supposed to advise the supervisors, and 3 of my recommendations that I made last time I was here, to add this to those 3 recommendations as being a real time sensitive issue when you're reporting to the Board of Supervisors regarding the broader recommendations.
Well, that is true. And that's why I stated that if you as an individual or your organization wants to come before it, we can go in chambers and stand with you. That is one way. But yeah, I could take a pen and piece of paper out and write, on our letterhead. But what I'm saying is that in terms of opposing or unopposing, we don't do that, and we can't do that. We're prohibited by our bylaws. But we can bring it to the supervisor's attention,
Right.
because they are the ones who would make that choice. And I do understand that time is of the essence. So again, out of respect for time and the rest of commissioners, why don't we meet offline with myself and Marlene and the other second vice chair, and we'll tighten this up throughout the week.
Yeah, and there's been some conversation about an op-ed in Hayward to give some pushback to Assemblymember Quirk. I know that idea has been floating around if the commissioners want to sign that op-ed. I think people have no idea that this is going on in Sacramento. And what we do know is that when they put these transmitters into people's communities, they get very upset. They get on the news, they have protests. So this is not something the communities really want. This is something the wireless industry really wants. And in their presentations to the Assembly, basically it was the industry supporting it, and then lots and lots of people opposing it on the other side. So this is a really skewed issue. And one of the things I didn't mention that it sounds like you might be very concerned about, is it has wording that says that says specifically, the legislature finds and declares that a wireless telecommunications facility has a significant economic impact in California and is not a municipal affair, as that term is used in Section 5 of Article 11 of the California Constitution, but is a matter of statewide concern. So this is wording in Assemblymember Quirk's that specifically takes the power away from local government to look at this issue and to decide where these go and make it a state matter. So
yeah, but we have partners on all
we
levels,
think
as you well
this is
know,
a clear attack on local control. And I know that's probably something that doesn't sit easy with the Board of Supervisors or yourselves. So
yeah, I wanted to get Commissioner Murphy to be at that meeting. Looks like he's dropped that call because he works for the California Consumer Affairs Commission, and I definitely want him on the meeting. So with that being said, we only have 2 minutes left, and actually we're 4 minutes past. So thank you again. Let's meet offline. I'll put you in contact where you and Marlene can touch base. And then, as a matter of fact, I saw you on an email string when I replied earlier this week, and then we'll go from here. We want to thank you again for joining us today. Make sure that you send us all of the links as well as the copies. And I'm pretty sure that we already have them, but I'll meet with Marlene offline. So again,
yeah,
thank you. And
before we adjourn, I would like to say to Kevin Matas, your report was great, but it's a lot of information, and I would like to have a copy of your report so I can pass it along to some other organizations. Mm-hmm.
All right. Did you hear that, Mr. Modis?
I can give you a copy of my notes, but it's not a report and it's informal notes, but I'm happy to share it.
Excellent.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay,
also,
Joseph, I get it. Marlene, see that I get that, please.
I heard someone say something
Kevin,
really quick. Someone say
yeah,
something.
Joseph, this is Chandu.
Yes, Commissioner.
Kevin, I would love to know the recommendations that you're referring, the 3 recommendations. So is there any way you could tell us quickly?
Yeah,
Those
quickly. I can tell you quickly. So one of the recommendation was for Alameda County to begin a registry for people who are sick, because that's what's not been done on any level. And that shows the problem very clearly. It supersedes any other type of argument of whether there's a problem. Obviously there is a problem. And we have testimonies already, but it would be nice for the Alameda County to set up something official. The second thing was, it would be nice for Alameda County to challenge, and I know a lot of other counties don't like this as well, the court cases based on Section 704 of the Telecom Act that took away the right of local and state government to look at biological and health effects. So to challenge that, because that's really at the root of a lot of this problem. And it was a brilliant move by the industry, but a lot of people have suffered as a result. And then the third thing was safety testing for different groups, at different ethnic groups, children, different genders. Begin your own safety testing. That's not happening anywhere. And again, that would show the problem very clearly and show the need for action very clearly, because we absolutely know for a portion of the population, and it's been estimated up to 30% of people are having some type of symptom of microwave sickness. They just don't relate it to actually the technology. And that 5% of people are sick to the point of disability is the numbers that we've looked at. That it'll discover that problem. It'll show that problem. So those 3 things would do a lot to move the needle. And frankly, Alameda County has been at the forefront of the issue of biological and health effects with the work of Dr. Joel Moskowitz from UC Berkeley School of Public Health, leading the way. So you'd be very consistent with what's happening in your county already.
All right. Thank you. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and move the agenda. I'm sorry, guys. We have to move the agenda. And with that being said, I'm going to table item 8 and the rest of the agenda until the next meeting. Next meeting will be held on June 10th, 2021. And again, hopefully everyone received something from today. It was a lot of information to process. And again, we thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to working with you soon. All right. With that being said, it is now 5:08. The Alameda County Consumer Affairs Commission meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all.